I think that, however, just as an on-the-ground organizer and as a movement scientist, I think it would be short-sighted of me to say that the current movement, the Black Lives Matter movement that went to a completely different level, was due to the on-the-ground urban rebellion of Ferguson.
That's right.
Now, I'm not...
Yes. It was.
And so I think that because
so
Black Lives Matter...
So you're saying that the violence got your attention?
It got everybody.
It got everybody's
attention. It's not just me personally.
Okay, but that I think that's not contradicting what I'm saying. I mean, first of all, I think I would draw a distinction between. I'm not talking about the right to self-defense. I'm not even talking about the right to violence. I don't think that's. I think that is, as you said, a dishonest question. I think the question is what is actually productive for a movement to move forward. And I think actually YGB is an example of actually responding to violence in a nonviolent way, right? And doing it in a way and organizing and actually creating a disciplined movement that can actually change policy, that can change the city. And that I don't think, I mean, there's nothing violent at all about that.
I'm not saying that all, like to your point, that all participants in a movement have to engage in that tactic. But what I am saying is that YGB in Madison, Wisconsin is also part of the national piece, which Ferguson was a huge piece of. I think had Ferguson not happened, there would have been groups around the country who were not as inspired, and it would have taken us 10 years perhaps to grow the scale to get enough people's attention before, because we responded to Ferguson.
That's right.
We started because of Michael Brown, and we knew Michael Brown. Police are murdering people everywhere. Right. We didn't respond to some place in random Arkansas, I don't know, because we don't know them. But we responded to some little place in Ferguson, or to Ferguson, because of an urban rebellion that had happened. And so I do think, you're right, we are coordinated, we are organized, absolutely, there's a place for that, but to discount, not that you're doing this, but to say that the urban rebellions don't have a significant, like they're not a catalyst, they are a catalyst. And without them, I mean, where would we be as a movement if we took out Ferguson right now?
Well, we wouldn't know Freddie Gray, that's for sure.
So,
what if we take him out?
Not saying you're wrong, but just putting a few more variables in the mix.
Okay.
So before Ferguson, there was Trayvon Martin. And a lot of what we're looking at is a media cycle. You're looking at not just are people protesting, but is that protest getting picked up by the national media, becoming part of a national media cycle? Part of what was going on in Ferguson is not just the rioting, it's also that a lot of Black organizations sent people there from around the country, and I think some of them were showing up before the riots, but I may have this wrong. I think there were mobilized activists who were already talking about the issue of police violence in the wake of the Trayvon Martin situation. It seemed to me, as a person who's been around a while watching these things, it seemed to me there was heightened interest in this going on. The media was more receptive. I mean, so just if you're thinking, so one of the reasons that violence has an impact is not so much that the violence itself has an impact, or I shouldn't say violence, but imprecise, the riot, urban insurrection. The reason it has an impact is that it's news, right? And so that's one of the complaints about the people in Baltimore had is where were we've been protesting, where were you? You only showed up when the rioting started. Yep. So then you're saying as long as the mass media and the white public is only going to pay attention to riots and is not going to pay attention to peaceful protests, then we're kind of shaping rioting. Or, the majority is kind of, so there's another way that's thought about as it's called coevolution, but there's the mutual shaping of political action with how it's responded to. Mm-hmm. So that's kind of what you're saying, that if the authorities or the majority, so let's say you're not the government, but you're part of the people, the majority, the public, that you're part of the white majority, so the larger white politicians are paying attention to you. If you respond, we respond to peaceful protest and pay a lot of attention to that, then there's no need to escalate to violence, that it's kind of the absence of response to the peaceful protest. You know, so I guess I'm not, as I said, it's not that you're wrong, I'm just trying to contextualize why is writing working. Oh, it's working because it's drawing attention. Why is it drawing attention? It's getting media coverage. It's kind of forcing people to pay attention to what they weren't paying attention to before.
And I mean, and the other thing is, you know, if the goal of nonviolence direct action or nonviolent civil disobedience is to draw out or make visible the tension in which people were sacrificing their bodies, and some of them their lives being beaten, the question ethically we have to ask is why do we have to get beaten? Why can't we draw the attention by throwing a rock? Police aren't getting killed by rocks. Nobody's getting killed. Nobody's dying in these things. So why is it then that the only method to draw out the attention or the acceptable or socially agreeable way is that, you know, we'll watch you get beat in the head by the police, and that's considered taking it to the next level. But if you break the window to some corporation, that's unacceptable, even though that also takes it to the next level.
Well, I thought blocking freeways got a lot of attention. My attention.
Some. I mean, yeah.
But you think not enough?
No, not nearly as much as if some person threw a stick.
I mean, so, you know, a lot of people,
It's true.
little riots happen a lot. And most of them don't get attention. The people get punished, but they don't actually get attention. They get attention when they're maybe I'm making this up. I don't think so. I'm thinking out loud here, but I think they get attention when they're part of the media cycle. That they're interpreted politically and they're understood as having political meaning and political importance in a political context where that's how they can be defined, and otherwise they're just defined. So why does the State Street riot get no news coverage?
They were white.
Okay, they're white, but another reason is that they're just
White.
Reason number two.
Because it's
but the
always
white
all
riots-
black people on State Street.
If it was 4 black people.
No, if it was all black people who were mad about the Badger game on State Street and done the same thing, it would be they'd be playing this in Palestine. Blacks in a red
But you know, I want to restate this distinction between. I mean, I think all of us would agree that it is socially acceptable for an oppressed people to riot. I would.
Or
You know,
morally.
what?
morally.
That morally acceptable. That people have a right to riot. And I think, you know, I would rather just take that off the table. The question is, okay, so we're not talking about what's socially acceptable. We know that when white people riot, it's socially acceptable. When black people riot, it's not, right? We know the way in which it's framed by the media. I think the question is how do we respond as people who care about justice, right? If we're going to put that off the table, then how do we move forward? And I think it does come down to this question. Do we think that Madison is a place in which the police are always going to be at war with people of color? And if that's the case, then people of color need to prepare for that, right? I guess I would like to imagine that that's not the case. I would like to imagine that we might be able to change Madison. And I don't think that actually has, I think that puts the burden of change on people in power. I think it puts it primarily on white people to actually make Madison a community in which people of color are not constantly at war with the police. But I think that whether the way you answer that question determines the strategy moving forward. And yeah.
Bring it
You
to
know, I'm with. This is what I couldn't.